Hey, how's it going, y'all? As you may know, I go by Nublado, and thanks for tuning into my review of the first mixtape by FKA Twigs, CARISONgs. Twigs is a singer, songwriter, producer, and dancer from the UK, and I've been a big fan of all her prior projects that she's released in the past. And as a short refresher, her first projects include her EPs EP1, which was released in 2012, and EP2, which was released in 2013. And these projects had more of an alternative R&B sound to them, and these EPs led up to the release of her first studio project, LP1, which was released in 2014, which carried a darker, more avant-pop sound to it compared to her EPs. After about a year went by, Twigs released her third EP, Melissa, which ended up sending her sound into a more experimental realm. Then after a long hiatus from dropping music, she had dropped her most recent project 2019, Magdalene, which has a solid art pop foundation to the sound. This is the project that has received the most critical acclaim up until this point in her music career, but people debate on her best being LP1 instead. Coming off of Magdalene, I personally was in a severe drought of Twigs music since she's been relatively silent on her end from dropping music, aside from a feature here or there. But I'm glad she's decided to drop music in the year 2022. Now, when I heard that this was going to be a mixtape, I had a thought pop into my head that I get with some artists that label their projects mixtapes nowadays. That meaning when the artist labels their projects as a mixtape, it generally is taken to not be as good as their studio albums. So with her saying that, I was hoping that she wouldn't be dropping anything mediocre, but I quickly got it together and reminded myself of the EP she's made and how much I love her music in general despite whatever term they're referred to. CARISONgs as a whole is definitely Twigs' most lively and dynamic project to date. There's a big sense of fellowship on this project with the number of collaborations she has and the use of samples from her friends in conversation, along with Twigs seeming to be more uplifted in her lyrics compared to the darker subject matter that we got from her previous work. Twigs has never had this many collaborations on a project before. In fact, I can only recall Future being her only feature from the track Holy Terrain on Magdalene. That being said, I was extremely curious to see how a project from Twigs sounded as a whole with features appearing throughout the track list. One of the main things I want to commend Twigs for is how she's able to take the lead on all her tracks and never sound like she's being outshined by the featured artist, while also letting the features shine in their own regard. Like on the track Jealousy featuring Rema, Twig kills it on the chorus and her verses and does well with fitting in with the style of production, aside from this not being her norm. Rema also does very well on his performance on the verse, and with his added harmonies on the second chorus as well. Another example of Twigs taking the lead is on the track Tears in the Club featuring The Weeknd. Again, she performs well, as her voice is at the forefront of the track and isn't outshined by The Weeknd's, but he still gives a decent vocal performance on this track to match the vibe set by the instrumental. Some of the other highlights I'd like to mention are actually on the first 3 tracks of the tape. This 3-track run of Ride the Dragon, Honda, and Meadow Angel is a great way to open up the project. Starting with Ride the Dragon, the beat on this track sounds pretty barren at the start and picks up as the chorus comes in. There are a bunch of extra perk sounds and other left field sound effects that back up the main drum pattern. The beat overall sounds very ambient with left field sounds being used alongside a hip hop / drum pattern. She seems to be patiently awaiting love from a dude who could very well be holding out on her or not picking up what she's putting down. I'm a big fan of how the beat progresses and shifts as the track progresses and the use of Twigs' pitched down vocal samples. On the second track, Honda, Twigs takes a desolate dancehall approach with the production on here. It starts off with a vocal sample from the featured artist, Salieu, I believe. I actually don't know how to say his name, so please don't kill me in the comments. But he seems to look at his struggles and hardships that he's endured up until now, and he preaches a keep moving forward and don't look back mentality. He speaks about echoed, choir-like vocals are present in the background to add to the track's ambience. I'm a fan of Twigs' vocal delivery on all of her parts on this track, including her performances on the chorus, which had a laid-back one, and with her first verse bringing more energy alongside the flow she uses. Then my favorite track from the tape comes after this, which is Meadow Angel. I'm a big fan of the angelic vocals from Twigs all throughout the track, along with the use of the pan guitar in the intro and the rising strings. As she delivers her first verse, the instrumental continues to build until the end of the chorus. Then the track gets stripped down to a singular piano, followed up by some banging kicks and snares. The beat continues to evolve with the second verse, with a loud started clap and some added sub bass. I'm in love with the track's production, and the big highlight on here is Twigs' vocals, of course. Her vocal chops or ad-libs also add to the track for me. I like how she's able to reach these higher registers with ease, and how she delivers each part of the song with a passionate yet despairing subject matter. She essentially states that she fears her inability to make it on her own and needed some type of meta angel to guide her in the right direction. Also, she states when she is feeling at her best, her love for desire and her love for herself continues to grow higher and higher, along with her being able to reach higher vocal ranges, as if she was a type of meta angel herself. I love how the track is also able to have elements of both serenity and a grandiose experience with the instrumental at times. The tracks that I just mentioned are among the strongest ones in the tape for me and have gotten played the most since the album has been released. There are other tracks to mention briefly that are really enjoyable, but not to the extent to the ones that I just mentioned. Tracks like All My Love, Lightbeamers, Minds of Men, Tears in the Club, and Jealousy, to name a few, give some solid vocal performances, lyrical content, and great production. On Lightbeamers, I like how Twigs goes into depth about people who share or overshare their own life struggles and potentially receiving harsh criticism from others as a result. When she delivers the lines, don't do it again, this seems to reflect this person's own hesitance to open up in that way again. As a way to solve this, Twigs gives her own way of dealing with these feelings of inadequacy or just general sadness by suggesting that the listener writes a list of true things that they value in themselves, and to look at that list on your lowest days to remind you of how much you mean to yourself. I'm a fan of this because this is something that I've had to do for myself, as there was a point where most of what I thought and what I thought of myself was negative. So doing that for an extensive period did work well in reshaping my thought patterns a bit. I was a bit skeptical about doing this at first, but it surprisingly ended up working well for me, so I'd recommend it. As for the instrumental, it takes a time signature of 3/4, which gives the tracks a waltz feeling. And I have a personal bias to songs in 3/4 because I like the feel that it gives, and that makes this track a definite highlight for me, along with the lyrics she gives on the track. I also like the lyrics on Minds of Men, where she addresses toxic masculinity as she wants to be an advocate for the healing of the minds of men, by emphasizing what it could mean to give men a safe place to lay down their fears with a woman and feel safe with letting their guard down when they need to. To speak more on the elements of production that I like on this project, All My Love was a definite standout in this area. I was immediately pulled in by the track's drum pattern, along with the dreamy plucked guitars and chords. There are also some amazing sounding kick drums, and the rolled or fluttered or stuttered hi-hats that appear throughout the song just make it a great track for me overall. Another one of the best tracks on this project is Darjeeling. I never heard Twigs or Jorja Smith on a drill beat before, but I'm surprised at how well they tackle it like it's their own home turf. The verse by Unknown T, who I've never heard of until this tape, gives a good performance too, as he has a powerful delivery and makes the drill approach come full circle. Although his contribution reminds me of a generic drill verse, I don't listen to too much drill myself, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt here. The beat is one of the hardest beats on the tape, with the hi-hat pattern, roll 808s, and the glistening harp strings that appear throughout, and apparently this chorus interpolates another song that I haven't heard of called Youre Not Alone by Olive. As mentioned already, this project has a strong list of songs to choose from, but there are some good tracks for me, but there are some that are good tracks to me but won't get as much play from me. The first track that falls into this category will be Pamplemousse. For me, this track acts as more of an interlude for me rather than a full-length song. The sound has elements of house while also hovering over a breakbeat groove with the drum pattern on here. I do like the choice of drum sounds on here, and Twigs appears on the track with higher pitched vocals at the end of the first verse and throughout the chorus. However, other than what I just mentioned, the song doesn't do much else for me, as it stands alongside the other tracks that have more to offer. The same goes for the track Which Way, as Twigs seems to be ruminating over her overall confusion and lack of direction she has with herself. Her talking to this devil could be a guy that she met, and that seems to tell her the direction that she should or could go in, but she knows somewhat that it may not be right. She also plays with the words left and right, where she says, "I left because I thought it was right," and then repeats left, right while panning her voice during the outro. The beat starts off pretty ambient and picks up with the addition of fast-paced hi-hats that appear throughout the track. The vocal harmonies in the background also add to the track's ambience, and it's a pretty short track, but it's definitely not up to par with the other tracks on here. But I do like how interesting the ideas are. The track Poppy Bones came as a surprise for me, since hearing Twigs on dancehall or anything more upbeat is generally unheard of from her, especially from what she's released from her own discography. The groove is dope on here, and I live for the horns on this track, along with the piano played on every second and fourth beat during the track. As for Shygirl's verse, it's a good fit with the track, but it wasn't too pronounced and makes it pretty forgettable each time I listen to it. And to go back to the track Tears in the Club, I did mention how well Twigs and the Weeknd do on this song, and is the most popular on the track list thus far. However, for me, the track doesn't do as much for me as compared to the tracks that surround it. The structure of the track felt pretty predictable for me when it was initially released as a single, and when it was initially released as a single, I was excited to see two of my favorite artists collab, but what I got wasn't too exciting as I thought it would be for me. There's also a smart part of the instrumental around the 2:40 mark that gets a bit too noisy for me, but this is for a short period. Again, this is a good track, but there are several tracks on the tape that I prefer over this one. As for the interludes on the mixtape, they do well with staying fairly short and with including people who Twigs holds close to her and add to the intimate feeling on the tape. However, they do feel a bit random in appearance as the flow of the tape is offset a bit as they each appear. The Christi interlude includes her longtime perfume collaborator Christi, who appears to be reading Twigs her horoscope. I imagine Twigs came to the decision of having her on this interlude as they've had a good relationship all of these years and probably had an experience of mutual growth and inspiration for each other. The track also includes the intro from the track Meta Angel to like wrap up things for the mixtape. I personally don't care for horoscopes, but as long as it fits in with the tape, I'm chillin'. The CARISONGS interlude is the shortest interlude on here with some heavenly vocals from Twigs as she sings the title of the album. Lastly, the Tracker interlude contains several fragmented vocal samples of conversations with her peers over this somber, glitchy, yet desolate instrumental. Twigs also adds some nice vocals towards the end of the interlude, and this interlude serves to fit one of the themes of the tape where her and or her peers express their own relationship preferences, struggles, and experiences. Thank You Song is the outro of FKA Twigs' first mixtape, CAPRISONGS. This track acts as a thank you to her lover by keeping her close in her moments of need, and by just simply caring for her and showing her love in her most vulnerable state, she's able to get past her own thoughts of suicide and pull her out of that dark place. I also feel like this thank you can be attributed to all her peers and collaborators on the project who have lent a hand in the past, or for her close friends who cared enough to help her through her lowest points. She opens up the track with the lines, "I wanted to die, I'm just being honest. I'm no longer afraid to say it out loud, so I put my ear to your chest till I hear the answer. Love emotion seems to save me now." And every time I put on this track, those lines just hit me straight in the feels every time, especially in the manner that she delivers it in. I also like how the piano and Twigs' vocals are the sole focus for most of the track and adds to the personal and somber atmosphere. The song does add more to it, but I'd say it gets a little bit too crowded during the chorus, but it's a small gripe. With all that in mind, I'd say Thank You Song is a great way to close out the mixtape. I'd say I'm overall a big fan of CAPRISONGS. Even though this is a mixtape, the sonic quality, vocal performances, lyrical content, and guest performances are great across the board and are enough to be considered album quality in my opinion. And like I mentioned before, I like how Twigs isn't outshined by her guest on here and remains in the forefront of each of her tracks. Some of the few things that hold this tape back from getting a higher score is the sporadically placed tracks and interludes, which sometimes throw off the flow of the mixtape for me. But this also helps the tape shine too, as the samples used on the interludes adds to the feeling of fellowship. Lastly, the wide mix of styles such as dancehall, drill, Afrobeat, R&B, etc. gives listeners a higher chance of finding something that they'd like on here, even if that ends up just being a handful of tracks. I'm giving this project a strong 8.5 out of 10.